Hi, my name is Jill Wilson from the Equality Practice. Today I have the delight to introduce a lady I've only just met, a lady who inspired me through her writing. Her written words were so powerful and impacted my sense of self and safety. They challenged my reality with what if the tables were turned, flipping the script on black and white experiences of life. Her words, both spoken and written, moved me to work harder to influence change and to ensure people see value in difference. This lady is a professional anti-racism writer, a professional B2B writer and blogger, and co-host of the Introvert Sisters Podcast. Sharon Hurley Hall, welcome to Including Me.
Thanks very much, Jill. Very happy to be here.
I'm glad to have you here too. So I'm going to dive straight into the questions here with you, Sharon. I'm going to say to you, in the UK, there is a few people around, quite a few, that think racism no longer exists. And they think this because the nasty words of the 60s, 70s and 80s, etc. are no longer used, at least overtly. So in 2021, Sharon, what does racism look like to you? What does it feel like?
Well, I can't remember who said it, but racism isn't the shark, it's the water. We all grew up with it being understood that whiteness is at the top of the tree. And this has been true since colonial times. It's how white explorers justified ravaging cities and civilizations. People think that racist abuse is the N-word or getting shot like people do in the US, but that's not true. A lot of it is the tiny one-on-one interactions that let Black and brown people know that they don't belong. Questions like, where are you really from? Where are your parents from? Statements like, you speak English so well. An immigration officer once asked me when I was coming into the UK with my British passport, all of those questions, and he kept asking and he said, but where were you born? I said, I was born in Streatham, mate. The assumptions that people make about your intelligence or your qualifications or your lack of them. I've had friends talking with white colleagues, and the white colleagues do a double take when this friend reveals that she has a master's degree, because in their mind this is not something that Black people have. So it's those little I call them little paper cuts, the microaggressions of racism, little paper cuts just chipping away at you all the time. So that is what the experience is like.
You said to me when we spoke earlier that on their own, each one of these you could wash off, but as they're put together on a daily basis, your daily interactions, they begin to weigh you down.
Absolutely. They're very, very wearing. Because if you think about it, Black and brown people are going through this every day, all their lives, from childhood all the way through. It's not just a case of one thing, it's a case of many things on a daily basis, right?
Do you think that we also spoke about the word fear, and the fear to get involved in a conversation with somebody that is different to you, for fear of offending, saying the right thing?
I can understand that, some people do have that fear, but my experience is that most people, if you are approaching from a genuine desire to know better and do better, and also that you have made some attempt to do some work yourself, right?
Yeah.
I think most people are open to that. I have friends all over the world, and we have had discussions about racism, about my experience as a Black woman. And those have been very good conversations that have helped them to learn and to grow. And I think that it's important to keep having those conversations. It really is.
And I don't think we can re-emphasize a point too much, because we're talking hopefully to try and educate a wider population that perhaps might not mean to say something rude or offensive. How how can they approach a black person? I mean, is there a secret?
Oh, okay. So that's
you ask. What shouldn't you say? What should you say?
That is a tough question and a large question in a sense. I think it's important when you're approaching black people to talk about racism, to avoid starting out from a perspective of apologizing for or denying that it exists. Because I think one of the things that white people need to realize is that black people and brown people are experts in racism. Okay? If you think that if you've done a job for 5 to 10 years, you're considered an expert in it. If you've logged 10,000 hours, you're considered an expert, right? Think of how many thousands of hours we have spent being affected by racism. So we know how to recognize it. So, the first thing is to avoid trying to minimize the fact that a racist thing happened. And then, again, you go in, with a little bit of humility and you say, here's something I don't quite understand. Would it be all right if I asked you about this? Or can you point me in the direction of where I can learn about that, for example? It's so important to be respectful, to do a little work yourself, and to approach it knowing that you don't really know what's happening. You don't really, as a white person, you're never going to fully understand it. Okay? You can be open to hearing and learning about it. You can empathize, you can do your bit to fight it, but you won't understand what it's like to live in the skin, because it's very wearing. The minute you step out of your house as a black person in a white majority space, you have to put on a certain amount of mental armor, right? Because people see your color first and your humanity last, if they see it at all. And it's very hard knowing that people don't value you as a person, and it's a mental health issue. And that's one of the big effects, I think, that can, on every individual person, right? I know that was something that we discussed before. Yeah. Is that, there's this feeling of not belonging, right?
Yeah. I think everybody needs to feel valued, and I think every person can relate to that. When somebody dismisses you, and I've been dismissed, but never because of the color of my skin. So I think that most people would be able to relate to being dismissed and what it feels like, and not valued as a person.
Exactly. I think people can relate to that, definitely. But it's so, I don't know, that sometimes it seems like there's such a gulf, but there's not a gulf if you think of us as all human beings, right? Human beings who just want to be included. Okay?
Yeah. So what would your ideal day, week, year look like, Sharon, in a very inclusive world? How different would it be?
Well, I often think that inclusion looks a little bit like Bridgerton, which I loved, because there was so little mention of race, right?
Yeah.
It was just people were people.
Yeah.
Yes. But on a more serious note, it's probably a bit like what I experienced growing up in the Caribbean. Okay? In school, unlike in the US and the UK, I wasn't singled out because of my skin color. Most people looked like me. Nobody had low expectations of me because of my skin color. On the contrary, in my school, we were all expected to excel. Yeah. We saw people like us holding powerful positions. Somebody who went to my school is now the Prime Minister of our country. Okay, so you get the sense that the sky's the limit. And I think it's really important to have that sense of possibility of potential achievement, which I think is often denied in the way that it starts young in school, right? And an inclusive society would mean not having to put on that mental armor and knowing that my skin color would be unremarkable and that nothing negative would happen because of it. It would be taking it as a given that I belong. And that's something that I don't think most Black and brown people in Britain, even if they were born there, necessarily experience.
Do you think, Sharon, that things are changing?
Slowly, very slowly. I feel like it's taking a long time for people to recognize the fact that, we all have to exist in this world. Black and brown people are a valid and valuable part of this world. Having diverse perspectives is valuable in life and in business. And so I think it's taking a really long time. You often feel like there's been some progress, okay? Period of enslavement ended, fine, but then there was a backlash. Civil rights movement in the US happened, but then there was a backlash. Every time there seems to be a little bit of progress, there always seems to be something pulling back in the other direction. There are always people that are resisting this change, because I think many people are reluctant to confront the racism that's in the water, and they don't want to feel bad, because the truth is that white people today benefit from the legacy of racism, even if they themselves don't have racist attitudes. Yeah. And if you start to think about it from that historical viewpoint, then it is also your responsibility to fix it.
And how can, I think you've alluded to this, but let's just lay it on the line. How can a white person help towards fixing it? What's one of the first things that person should be doing?
Well, the first thing the person should be doing is examining their own attitudes to and relationships with the Black and brown people around them. And the second thing they can be doing is using their privilege, because they do have privilege, for good, to give those people a voice, to give them a leg up, to kind of redress the balance. Those are two things that it's very easy to do. And that might be as simple as calling out someone else when you see them being racist, and providing visible and vocal support for somebody who is experiencing a microaggression. And it could be, supporting a Black-owned business. It could be, supporting petitions and law changes to the law that make the playing field more level, right? And making sure that it actually is level. Because what tends to happen with a lot of these things is you bring in some equality legislation and women as a whole benefit, which basically means white women benefit, but Black people don't tend to benefit. That's how those things usually end up working. There have been a lot of studies on this, and that's how it works. So it's about using your privilege for good. And I think that's the final word, really.
Well, if that is the final word, I can only say I am thrilled that you agreed to come on to Including Me. Thank you, Sharon, for being a part of Including Me.
And thank you, Jill. Happy to be here.